By the end of this video, when we walk up to our shop NPC, we'll see our shop stock appearing in our shop UI, as well as our player's inventory. But we'll get the buying and selling done in the next video, as there's a lot of code for this one. Let's check it out. Cool, so first of all, I'm gonna go to my game controller. On here, we've got lots of different controller scripts. We're gonna add a new script for our currency controller, which we can use to add money to our currency amount and also take away from it. So let's double click on this. And in here, we won't need the start and update, so let's delete those. But we will want a public static currency controller instance, as well as a serialized field of a private int starting gold, which I'll set to equal 100. This is how much gold you'll begin with at a new game. A private int for player gold, which will be our player's current gold. And a public event action, which we'll want to pass in an int. And to get this to work, we need to hover over show potential fixes and using system. And I'll call this on gold changed. So whenever our gold is changed in our game, either by selling or buying or maybe a quest reward, we can trigger this and have other things subscribed to it so that our currency text gets updated where it needs to be. Next, we'll want to use Unity's awake to say if our instance is not null and our instance is not this, we want to destroy that game object. Else, we want to set this instance up to be this game object so that we only ever have one that is statically used across our whole game. And we'll set our player gold to equal our starting gold. Now we can write a simple get method with a public int get gold. You do brackets, arrow function, so equals and then greater than player gold. So we can get this amount from outside the script. Also want a public bool, and we'll pass in an int for the amount, where we'll say if player gold is greater than or equal to the amount, player gold minus equals the amount, and then we can call on gold changed question mark to make sure this has been set, dot invoke player gold. So we're going to be using this to update the text in our shop. When we invoke this, we pass in how much current gold we have so that we can add that to the text on our UI. Now, if we have enough money, we're going to return true to say our player gold was more than the amount. So we was able to spend our money, return true. Otherwise, if our player gold was not greater than or equal to the amount, we didn't have enough money, so we're going to return false. Next, when we sell an item, we're going to want a public void for add gold of the int amount, and opposite of our other one, we want this to plus equals the amount on our player gold, and copy this from above, we want our on gold changed dot invoke player gold again. And finally, for when we load our game, we're going to want a public void for set gold. Once again, our int amount. Here we'll just set player gold equal to the amount and copy and paste this from the other functions once again. Cool, that's our currency controller all done. Back in Unity, we're now going to add our shop controller. I'm actually going to add this as a separate object on our game controller. This just makes sense in my head. You can obviously put these wherever you want, but they'll have to be on an object. It's always turned on in your game, so it's always accessible. I'll create a new script on this and call it shop controller. Double click on this to open it up. Now we're not going to need the update, but we will use the start, so I'll leave that there. But at the top, we'll once again want a public static shop controller instance. Then we're going to have some references to our UI elements for our shop. So I've just added a little header. This will pop up in our inspector in Unity. But we're going to want a public game object for our shop panel, a public transform for our shop inventory grid, comma, and our player inventory grid, a public game object for our shop slot prefab, and a public TMP text, which we'll have to do show potential fixes and add using TMP Pro for our player money text, comma, our shop title text. And finally, at the bottom, we'll want a private item dictionary for our item dictionary, which we added in our game before. And we're also going to need a private shop NPC, which we haven't written the script for yet, for our current shop. We'll add this script in a minute, but first of all, let's add our awake and a shorthand version of making our instance, just so you can see the different ways of doing it. If our instance equals null, our instance equals this, else destroy our game object. This does the same as in our currency controller, it's just a shorter syntax. You can do whatever you prefer. So now inside our start, we're going to want our item dictionary equals find object of type item dictionary. When we start our game, we don't want our shop panel active, so we'll set our shop panel active to false. And we'll check if our currency controller is not null. So currency manager.instance is not null. Then we'll go currency controller.instance.onGoldChanged plus equals update money display. So when the gold is changed, we'll update our money display as we pass this in with our player money text. So down below, let's write this function of a private void update money display, where we're passing in an int of our amount. we can say if our player money text is not null, player money text.text equals amount.toString. Cool, so when our money is changed, it'll update our money display as we've added this to this event. And we'll also call update money display on start and pass in our currency controller .instance.getGold. Cool, now let's write a function for when we want to open up our shop menu. So we'll go public void open shop, and we'll pass in, again, we haven't written the script yet, but it's going to be our ShopNPC shop. We'll write the script once we've done these two functions, don't worry. Then we'll set our current shop to equal shop. Our shop panel.setActive will be true. Then we'll say if our shop title text does not equal null, so we've got our text passed in, then our shop title text.text can equal the shopkeeper's name, and then shop. So if the shopkeeper is called GCL, it'll be called GCL's shop. We'll write some functions in future that we'll call here, which will be to refresh our shop display so that when we open a shop, we get our items in of that shop. And we'll also refresh our player inventory display so we can show any new items our player might have picked up that they might want to sell to the shop. We'll also call our pause controller, set pause, and set it to true so that when our shop is open, we can't go running around. Cool, and then we also want a public void close shop, which very easy. We'll grab this shop panel set active to true and change that to be false. This current shop equals shop from the opening we'll want to set to null, and our pause controller setting to true, we'll want to set this to false so our game can play again. Very cool. Okay, let's take a little break from our shop controller. We'll come back to it, but let's now go create a shop NPC. So back in Unity. So if I take a look inside our map bounds, inside T1, we've got NPCs running around. Inside these objects, we have our waypoint parent as they walk around and our NPC. I'm going to copy out our NPC old man and paste him down below, close down our map bounds. And on here, I'm not going to need our NPC script. I'm not going to need our waypoint mover as he's going to be stationary. And I'll leave our sprite resolver in case you want to change his icon and have your NPC animated around. That's up to you. I'll rename this to be ShopNPC, and I'll move him to be standing outside our building here. So cool, on our ShopNPC, I'm going to add a new component of a new script and call it ShopNPC. We'll double click on this to open it up, and we won't use our update, but we will use our start. So we'll leave that there. And at the very top, next to mono behavior, hopefully you've done our interactables video, because we're going to use our iInteractable so that we can interact with our NPC. Of course, if you hover over, it's telling us we need to implement these two functions for our interface to work. So we can click on this and add them in. I'm going to move our start up above them just so it's tidier. And at the top, we're going to want a public string for shop ID. This is what we'll use in our save to know which one's which. So you can call it whatever you want, shop merchant number 1. And then we'll want a public string shopkeeper name, which I'll just call merchant. Next, we're going to want to know what items we have in our shop. To do that, we'll add a nice little class using a system.serializable, then type in public class shop stock item, where inside we'll want a public int item ID and a public int quantity. So with these, we can make a public list of a shop stock item, which I'll call default shop stock, and we'll set to equals new brackets. Then you can duplicate this down with Control D, make this a private list of shop stock item, and we'll call this current shop stock. And finally, we'll want a private bool called isInitialize, which I'll set to a default of false to know has this shop been set up before. We're going to use this in a function that I'll write below our start for a private void initialize shop, where we can check if is initialized, and if it is, we'll return, so we don't do this again. Then we'll set our current shop stock to equal a new list of shop stock items, and say for each item in our default shop stock, we'll go current shop stock dot add new shop stock item, this is getting hard to say, and set our item ID to equals our item.item ID, comma, quantity to equal our item.quantity. And outside the for each, we'll set isInitialized to equal true. So this will set up our default stock, and this will be overwritten by our save system if a save exists. We'll call this initialize shop inside our start. And now we can set up our two functions that we need for our interface. So for can interact, all we're going to need is return true, because we always want to interact with our shopkeeper. Maybe in future you want to add features where the shops only open in the day or at night. So you'd be able to check something like time manager.isDay and return this to be your true or false to say it's only open in the daytime. Or maybe a certain quest needs to be complete, so you can be like return quest manager.is, complete, that kind of thing. But for us, we're always going to have this shop open. And then in our interact, we'll want to use our shop controller we just wrote and check if there's an instance. So shop controller equals null. And if it is null, we'll return, as we can't open our shop as there's no script. Else we can say shop controller dot instance dot shop panel dot active self, which is basically us checking, is the panel visible right now? So if it is visible, we're going to want to go shop controller dot instance dot close shop so that this closes down. Else we're going to want to go shop controller instance dot open shop, and we'll pass in this so it knows that this is the shop we're opening and this is the details we want. Okay, now let's get our functions ready for interacting with our shop. So we're going to want a public list of a shop stock item called getCurrentStock, which will simply return our current shop stock. For our save system, we're going to want a public void setStock, where we'll pass in a list of our shop stock items. I'll call this stock. And here we'll want to set our current shop stock to equal the stock we're passing in and loading from our save. Next, we'll want a public void add to stock, where we'll pass in an item ID and quantity. So this will be when we sell to our shop. So we'll want a shop stock item, which I'll call existing, to equal our current shop stock dot find, and we'll go s arrow function s.item ID equals item ID. We're seeing if we've currently got any. If existing is not null, so we've found an existing item that matches the one we're adding to our stock, we'll simply go existing.quantity plus equals quantity. Else we'll go current shop stock dot add brackets new shop stock item curly braces item ID equals item ID comma quantity equals quantity. Cool, so that adds to our stock. Now, as with everything, we need the yin and the yang. We'll need a public bool remove from shop stock. And again, we'll pass in int item ID, int quantity. So let's copy what we did in our add to stock, paste it down below, and we're going to adapt this. So we still want to find our existing to remove from the shop stock. In our check for if the existing is not null, we're also going to say, and our existing dot quantity is greater than or equal to the quantity we're passing in. Then instead of plus equals quantity, we'll want minus equals, so we take one away, and then we'll return true. And instead of this else, we're simply going to return false. Cool, so that's everything we need for our ShopNPC script. We can now go back to Unity. We'll be able to test out our ShopNPC, but first of all, let's go to our shop controller and set up our UI here. So let's click the little padlock at the top so this doesn't move while we click around. Open up our UI canvas. Here we've got our shop menu that goes into our shop panel slot. We'll open this up. We've got our player money text that can go in our player money text slot. Open up our shop content. So we've got our player inventory area. We'll open that up. Open up the scroll view, open up the viewport, and inside content, we've got our player inventory grid. So that goes inside our player inventory grid. Close down the player inventory area, open up the shop inventory area. We've got the shop inventory text that goes into shop text title, and then inside the scroll view, inside the viewport, inside our content, we've got our shop inventory grid. So let's drag that on in. Then last of all, we've got our shop slot prefab to fill. Let's go inside our prefabs folder, and inside here we've got our shop slot. Drag it on in, and now we should be able to press play. We can walk on over to our new shop NPC, press our interact button, and we'll see our shop pops up. Hooray! If we press our interact button again, it'll close our shop on down, and we can move around again. Cool. So now let's get our shop populated with the items in our shop's stock. If we go back to our ShopController script, on our open shop we have these two functions we commented out that we want to make. So let's make those. We'll first do our public void refresh shop display. Well, we'll first check if our current shop is equal to null, we'll return. Else we're going to go around with a for each for our transform child in shop inventory grid and destroy that child.gameObject. So we're going to clean out the whole shop display. Then we'll go for each bar stock item in current shop dot get current stock. We'll check and say if our stock item dot quantity is less than or equal to 0. We'll continue and skip over this. Else we're going to call a new function that's going to be create shop slot. This is where we'll create our shop slot and add in the item that the shop contains. Before we do this, we can go back up to our open shop and add this function in that we've just written. And now we can write the next one, which will be our refresh player inventory display. So let's copy our refresh shop display, as we can reuse some of this, and rename it as our refresh player inventory display. So instead of checking if our current shop is null, we're going to want to check for if our inventory controller dot instance is null. If so, we'll return. Else we'll clear out every child in our player inventory grid and clear that on out. This for each is going to be a bit different as we want to go around our inventory. So we're going to go for each transform, slot transform in our inventory controller dot instance dot inventory panel dot transform. Then we'll get our slot of our inventory slot to equal our slot transform dot get component and pass in slot. And we'll check if our inventory slot question mark to check if it's null or not dot current item is not null, so we do have an item in our inventory slot. We'll go item dot original item equals inventory slot dot get current item dot get component and pass in item. And then that's where we'll call our create shop slot to hold our inventory items. Cool, now let's go up and add our refresh player inventory display into our open shop before we forget. And down the bottom, we'll do our create shop slot function. Let's go private void create shop slot. We're going to want a transform for the grid, an int for the item ID, an int for the quantity, a bool to know if this is our shop grid or if it's our player's inventory grid, and a slot for the original slot, which we'll set as a default to equal null, as we'll only need to know this if it is not our shop and it's our player inventory. So cool, let's go game object slot object equals instantiate shop slot prefab, comma grid. So we're creating a new shop slot within our grid that we passed in. Then a game object item prefab to equal our item dictionary dot get item prefab and pass in our item ID. If our item prefab equals null, we'll return. Next, we'll create a new item instance of this prefab. So we'll go game object item instance equals instantiate and pass in item prefab into our slot object. So we've got a new one of our items inside our shop, and to make sure this is centered, this is what I do for our slots. In our inventory, we do item instance dot get component rect transform dot anchored position and set this to vector2.0. Next, we'll want to go item equals item instance dot get component item, and we'll set our item dot quantity to equal our quantity passed in, and then item dot update quantity display. So our shop might have 100 of one item. We'll want this displaying in the shop. Next, we'll set up our price. So if it's in the inventory or in the shop, it's going to be different. So we'll go int price equals is shop question mark. So if it is a shop, we're going to want our item dot buy price. Else we'll go colon item dot get sell price. Each item has its sell multiplier that we set up in the last video on our items. Next up, we're going to want our shop slot equals slot object dot get component, and we'll pass in shop slot. Oh, we'll call this shop slot shop slot, a lot of repetition. And we'll say slot dot is shop slot equals is shop. So we know when clicking on these items and on these slots, if we're in the shop grid, so we want to buy things, or if we're in the inventory grid, so we want to sell things. And we'll go slot dot set item, pass in our item instance and the price. So this will work for both our inventory and our shop. Cool, in our next video we're going to be adding a little bit more here, where we'll need to edit our item handler. That's on each of our items, but we'll do that next time, so don't worry. For now, our create shop slot is done. We'll copy this and paste it both in our refresh player inventory display, where we're going to want to pass in our player inventory grid, our original item .id, our original item .quantity, false, as this is asking is it a shop? No, it's not, it's our inventory. And we'll want to pass in our inventory slot. Then up in our refresh shop display, we'll want create shop slot and pass in our shop inventory grid, our stock item .item ID, our stock item .quantity, and is it a shop? Yes, it is. True. We don't want to pass in any slots, as these are just being created in our grid for us. Cool, that is our ShopController script for now. Well done, that was a lot of code. Let's go back to Unity, and if we press play now, our shop inventory will be empty because on our shop NPC, if we scroll down on the script, we haven't added any default shop stock. This has been a tongue twister. So let's add in some new elements. We want to grab an item ID and set its quantity. If I go to our prefabs and check our items, you can see on my item script, my green potion has an ID of 1, and my heart item potion has an ID of 2. So on our shop NPC, I'll add in, let's go heart potion first. So ID number 2 is going to be first. I'll say we've got 5 of those, and ID number 1, we've got 2 of those. So now when we press play, so let's talk to our NPC. You can see inside his shop, we've got the 5 heart items and the 2 potions. Our player inventory is empty right now, as we haven't picked anything up, so let's go up into my forest. I'll pick up some items. That was 3 normal potions and 2 heart potions. Go to our NPC. Oh, maybe I picked up 4. And now you can see our player inventory has populated. You can see the buy price is half of what you can see to sell these items. They're worth half as much as in the merchant shop, as our buy multiplier is 50%. Oh, and I've just remembered, if I click this X, we stay paused in our game, as we didn't add our new function onto this close button. So let's close our game down, go to our UI canvas, and on our close button, we can scroll on down, drag our shop controller into this on click. On no function, we'll scroll down to the shop controller and select close shop, so that when we click that button, it'll close down properly and unpause our game. Cool, just to test out, I'm going to change the buy price of our heart potion to be double, so we can see the differences in the prices showing up. So let's go to our NPC. We can now see these are worth 20 each and 10 each of our potions. Let's test it once again and pick up a couple of these. In my inventory, you can see I've got 2 potions and 1 heart potion, and there we are. These are worth half the amount, so 20 to 10 and 10 to 5. Of course, right now this doesn't do anything, as we've got our drag handler on and nothing else in our game, so this doesn't work properly yet. But we'll do that next time, as well as add it to our save controller, so we don't get overwhelmed. And by we, I mean me. Until then, if you want to grab every single script I've ever written for this series and the whole channel, you can check it out on my Patreon, or if you want this whole template completed for you, with all finished and future updates, you could check it out on itch.io, where you get this whole Unity package for yourself. Otherwise, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!